At 0542 hours local time, radar operators inside the USS Ronald Reagan's Combat Information Center detected a coordinated Chinese naval formation closing fast in the South China Sea. Within seconds, the contact picture clarified. Two People's Liberation Army Navy destroyers, multiple corvettes, and fast attack missile boats maneuvering toward a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group conducting a lawful freedom of navigation operation. This was not a routine encounter. It was a deliberate attempt by the Chinese Navy to challenge a U.S. Navy carrier in one of the most contested maritime regions on Earth. What followed over the next 20 minutes revealed a decisive imbalance in naval power, and why modern carrier strike groups remain untouchable when doctrine, sensors, and joint networks are fully engaged. The South China Sea carries more than $3 trillion in global trade each year, and every move made that morning was watched, logged, and understood in real time. For the United States, being able to freely navigate these waterways is a long-term strategic goal. It supports trade around the world and stops regional actors from trying to enforce illegal maritime claims. The Reagan Strike Group was following international law and carrying out planned freedom of navigation operations in territorial seas and exclusive economic zones that were recognized by established rules. That morning, the People's Liberation Army Navy plan of China took an aggressive stance and tried to stop the Reagan from moving. Their goal was clear: to show strength and change the way things are. But they made a big mistake in their calculations. Breakdown of tactics. Reagan's AN/SPY-1 radar system quickly identified the incoming contacts. Operators logged several interaction tracks and set threat and priority levels in seconds. These weren't just fishing boats or civilian ships. These were fighters who were maximizing vectoring and closing rates for an intercept. At the same time, the Aegis combat system started to build a layered defense picture by cross-referencing radar, OIS data, electronic emissions intelligence, ELINT, and satellite uplinks. The Reagan Strike Group had a fully integrated operating picture in just a few minutes. Weapons are ready. The USS Antietam and USS Chancellorsville changed their weaponry status to high. Their SPY-1 radars lit up the oceans with active arrays. The vertical launch system cells were full of possibilities. SM-6s for long-range attacks and SM-3s in reserve for when they needed to defend against ballistic missiles. Surface warfare officers changed the engagement zones, but they did it within the rules of engagement. Two E-2D advanced Hawkeyes kept an eye on everything from above at the same time, extending detection ranges well beyond the horizon. Their radar operators confirmed that the Chinese formation that was coming up didn't have any aerial early warning support, which was a big problem that would soon become important. At 0545 hours, the plane took off. Super Hornets from VFA 147 took off in a controlled order. Their job was simple but very important. Take control of the air, make the battlefield bigger, and make their presence clear. These jets have AIM-120 AMRAAMs and AGM-88 HARM missiles on board. They weren't meant to attack, but to keep people from attacking and control the area. The Hornets were directed to intercept any unknown aircraft in the conflict corridor within 6 minutes of launch. The message was clear. U.S. forces were still in charge of the air. At 0547 hours, electronic control. The Ronald Reagan and the destroyers that were with it had electronic warfare equipment that was turned on. N/SLQ-32 systems started picking up and studying Chinese radar signals. The U.S. network has already listed the electronic order of battle for each ship in the approaching formation within minutes. The Carrier Strike Group had an unbeatable tactical advantage because they were more informed of the situation than the other side. Chinese command elements were sending messages with unique signatures, and U.S. soldiers were quietly collecting the information. At 0550 hours, the blockade attempt became stronger. The Chinese destroyers moved at an angle to make it harder for the Reagan to navigate. In normal naval tactics, this would have meant making a choice. Either slow down and talk things over or use maneuvering to demonstrate your right to navigate. The Carrier Strike Group stayed in formation. Cruisers and destroyers moved about to make room for passageways, using the Reagan's huge radar footprint as a shield. Every sensor in the United States was keeping an eye on the enemy. Doctrine won against aggressiveness. The U.S. forces never wavered. There was no guesswork in any of the actions. They were all based on tactical certainty. Even though the American formation had fewer ships, it was never alone. The U.S. Navy's way of doing things is based on interconnected battle networks, where every sensor talks to every weapon system. With this level of integration, U.S. soldiers always have the upper hand, even when they are outnumbered. The Aegis combat system and old radar networks link 16 networked communications versus data silos that are separate from each other. E-2D Hawkeye aerial surveillance versus limited Chinese airborne ISR Super Hornet air cover versus no-plan fighter escorts. The Chinese formation couldn't get close without being seen, followed, and outsmarted in battle. Even when they were quite close, US troops stayed disciplined. The aim was to keep things from getting worse, not to start them. Hence, weapons were not fired. The Marine Corps and Navy. Even though Marine units weren't deployed in this precise fight, the Marine readiness and naval support were clear. Landing boats and amphibious readiness groups were set up so that they could reinforce or evacuate as needed. This strategic depth made sure that no sailor or asset was ever really alone. In US Doctrine, every fight has a plan for getting more troops and getting out of the fight. Every unit, whether on land or at sea, is part of a larger interdependent mission network. This is a key feature of American joint operations. This level of readiness keeps enemies away not by showing off, but by showing what they can do. Control of escalation. At 05:55 hours, communications officers on the USS Chancellorsville sent out a series of regular broadcast warnings to the Chinese ships that were getting closer. These warnings were sent out on maritime frequencies that are known around the world. The communications didn't ask for anything, they just made it obvious that the US was going to follow the rules and navigate safely. The Chinese ships stood their ground and refused to back down. This harsh response could have led to kinetic engagement in less skilled hands. By not escalating too soon, US forces put the enemy in a strategic bind. With each passing minute, the Chinese formation encountered more and more American capabilities in the air, at sea, electronically, and in terms of logistics, and there was no way for them to get around them. After over 20 minutes of increasing tactical pressure and clear readiness, the Chinese ship started to leave at 6:01 hours. There was no news, no apology in public, no big act of retreat. They just turned off, which slowed down their contact speed and opened up lateral distance. This was not a victory based on violent conflict or forceful aggression. It was a show of planned domination. The US naval formation kept control of the operational space, protected legal transit rights, and stopped a potentially dangerous fight without firing a shot. Afterward, US commanders went over tactical data again, recorded every sensor reading, and changed their readiness levels for future transits. The brief but strategically important contact reiterated a key truth about current maritime operations. The removed group was given time to think about its beliefs again. But the world could see that the US Navy's presence in the South China Sea was not just for show. It was real, strong, and backed by the best tactical integration. Intelligence units started looking at mission data right away. All of the electronic signatures, strategies, and navigational choices made by the other side were used to make bigger strategic decisions. Senior planners found similarities, including as attempts to dispute freedom of navigation operations, dependence on regional flotilla tactics, and deficiencies in plan airborne coordination. These findings might help with future preparedness cycles, but in terms of tactics, the fight had already sent its clear message. The mission goes on. The US Navy is always on alert in waters across the world, protecting international conventions and stopping illegal force projection. The situation in the South China Sea hasn't gotten better. It's become a clear strategic barrier that is watched, managed, and understood. For clear military analysis rooted in operational reality and unfiltered insight into naval power dynamics, make sure you are subscribed to Navy Recon, with notifications enabled and ready for what comes next. The watch never ends. The mission endures. Navy Recon will be there.